Are you bored of talking about social justice?
Mm, in one way, no, because they're so endlessly entertaining. Uh, the opposition, you think they can't come up with anything worse and madder, and then they do. And you think, I'm sure that must be a satire. And it turns out not to be. And they make the same mistakes in the same order every time. Yeah, I mean that stuff is endlessly, I mean, there are. By the way, there's some very serious ones. I mean, there was one that came up the other day. The American Psychological Association decided to become a sort of racist organization. It announced that all white people have white supremacy, and a blood problem, basically, by being white. And now, of course, the American Psychological Association last year decided that men were a problem. So I just sort of think at some point the American Psychological Association is going to have to refer itself to a psychologist, I suppose. But 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 they do this on a very regular basis. The UN did it today. The UN declared that what was it? Yeah, until we address the usual thing, cis heteronormativity, patriarchy, there won't be peace in the world. And you think, yeah, I don't know if that's going to solve Yemen. But I mean, it's actually what you do if you can't solve Yemen, isn't it? You start jabbering on about heteronormativity somewhere in Geneva. But yeah, they come up with things every day. I'm fascinated by that, but I also don't spend all my time on it. Or at least let me rephrase that. I spend too much of my time on it, but I always balance it out with something worthwhile. So, I literally think of it like sustenance. If I spend some hours imbibing the latest crazy shit that everyone's doing today, I read a really good book. Or I watch a terrific movie I've never seen.
So you're allowed to eat the hamburger as long as you go to the gym at some point.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely advise this for everybody. Like the joy of reading old books, the joy of watching old movies. Just take a classic movie you never bothered with, or a classic book you've never read, and read it. It's the best antidote to it. And by the way, it's not just an antidote. It's very important because it reminds you of how people lived until the weird era we're in. It helps give you very basic things that our era is losing: perspective, sense of judgment, and much more. So that's, that really is an important tip, if I can say so. People cannot imbibe just what we're being told to imbibe.
You said on the trigonometry episode I watched that we're standing on the precipice. And it's interesting that you use that word because I've been thinking about this for quite a while. Toby Ord, who is from the Future of Humanities Institute at Oxford, he wrote a book called The Precipice, and it's all about existential threat.
Wonderful. Yes. I've heard him. Yes.
Wonderful. Australian dude. Also big into the effective altruism movement. Fantastic.
Right. Yeah. I read him on altruism. That's right.
Huge, big picture thinking. And he called his book The Precipice. And he gives humanity's chances of surviving the next century 1 in 3. He gives humanity's chances of reaching our full potential as a civilization, spacefaring, colonize the galaxy, at 1 in 2. So the vast majority of our risk as a species is front-loaded within the next century. My concern is that smart people like you, like Gad Saad, like Sam Harris, are using up brain power on things that are self-defeating. There's a concept by Robin Hanson called the Great Filter, which explains the Fermi paradox. Why are there not aliens out there? He suggests that there is a particular section that we need to get past. And given that some of the smartest minds of the last few years have spent an inordinate amount of time trying to work out whether men are women or not, to me, feels like that could be if that's the reason that as a species we don't reach our full potential because we decided to have these stupid tribal, like childish, completely idiotic, self-defeating discussions. When the asteroid comes, or a slightly more effective pathogen hits, or pick any one of the other existential risks that Toby brings up in his book, like, we did this to ourselves. We blew it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I've said this quite often. In my own defense, and if I'm not going to do it, who would? Uh, the purpose of, for instance, the Madness of Crowds is to give everyone else a fast track out. I can't stress this enough. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, as you just mentioned, you've spoken with, also do an excellent task in a portion of this to do with the academic element in their new book, Cynical Theories. The point is that I don't want everyone to spend their life reading unreadable books. I've read a significant number of them in order to tell people not to read them because it's not worth their time. And it's the same with quite a lot of the subjects I deal with in the Madness of Crowds, is to say, this doesn't work, don't fall for it, this is a Ponzi scheme, that's a fraud. Now, that is not because I want to spend the rest of my life talking about mad Ponzi schemes invented by frauds. It's because I want everyone else to get through and or round or across this or over the top of this or burrow underneath it, however you're going to do it, as fast as possible. It's very hard to do it if you don't know what you're facing. Because if you don't know what you're facing, you've got a disproportionate likelihood of getting killed, blown up. If you know what you're facing and you know the shortcut ways through, it's likely you can get on with the rest of your life. And that's why I did them. That's why I wrote The Madness of Crowds, first of all, and why I've now updated it, is because I wanted to stop particularly young people, first of all, feeling intimidated by this, including intellectually intimidated, because they shouldn't feel intellectually intimidated by this. Secondly, for them to realize the size of the thing that they're being faced with. In other words, a total reorganization of everything, which I submit is not going to work. But crucially, that in knowing and understanding this, you can get through and get on with your life. And this is a very important task, because I absolutely agree that for a lot of us, I mean, millions and millions of us, everybody on the planet, we are wasting an opportunity at the moment. And the opportunity is, as you describe, is that at this time in our history, there is so much we can do because we have access to knowledge in a way that we never did in the past. Our forebears had to live with ignorance on a lot of things. And the most obvious one is, if you didn't have access to a book, you didn't know what was in it. Who doesn't now have access to a book? If they've got a relatively small sum of money, they can join a lending library, or they can buy a book online. You can get a classic book. You can get hold of things. Very recently, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, certainly that wasn't the case. So that's the case in area after area. We live in a time where instead of being in ignorance about so many things, you can just put it into a search engine. And why in that situation are we spending our time, as you say, talking about whether or not intersex people with a particular condition are the same as trans people? I mean, I often used to joke, this is what happens when the barbarians break in. We'll all get Kalashnikoved whilst talking about gender neutral bathrooms. What a horrible last thought to go through your head. No. And I've always thought that. And as I say, a self-appointed task of mine is to try to help other people get through that itself. But I stress, and I think I said this the other day to the people on trigonometry, there is also a very, very important thing that people need to bear in mind, which is not to put off what you're meant to be doing with your life. Not to put it off in particular because you want the conditions of life to become optimal. I think I have it here somewhere. I said to the trigonometry people the other day, I was reading a sermon that C.S. Lewis gave in 1939, just at the outbreak of war. And it's such a moving sermon because he says in it, these aren't optimal times, but they never were. They never were. And as he says, if human beings put off their search for beauty and truth and creation until the times were optimal, they'd never have got started. We would never have started doing anything. And the thing that's so desperate about the politicization of everything, and the reason I say to people, please depoliticize your lives, is because it is not what you were meant to do. It's not what we were meant to do, to spend our time endlessly going around such issues. All of us, every single person watching, you and me, all have an enormous amount that we could do with our life, an enormous amount we can contribute. Probably the least positive thing we can contribute is to some mass movement that's almost certainly got enough members anyway, even if it was going in a good direction, and they almost never do. And what you're meant to be doing should not be put off until that movement gains total ascendancy. Firstly, because it won't, and secondly, because it'll be hell even if it did. So don't put it off, whatever it is you're meant to be doing, but do work out how to survive in this era, and then get on to doing the thing you should be doing with your life. Because I can assure every single person watching, it is going to be so much more damn rewarding than what you're being offered at the moment.
Topics like that, and that particular passage that you pulled from the sermon in 1939, that's what I want more of. That's what I want. People like James Lindsay with a PhD in pure mathematics. Bro, stop. I don't want the world to have. He should be getting us to Mars. He should be trying to do. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear more of that timeless, evergreen wisdom, that is going to be the sort of thing that's usable in 50 years' time or 100 years' time. Because
I agree.
Critical race theory isn't.